liberty, and justice for all.
If you got questions, I'm going to start to make videos. I want to, based on, do better videos when I'm answering questions rather than just trying to do on there about localism first. So I don't know if you've seen the video or not on my YouTube page. So if you go to Constitution Study Television, and the latest thing is based on the question. Ran up those stairs. Now, Matt,
I don't know stairs.
I can run, but well, you know, earlier I had things going on. That's not part of the class. But the question was, the Constitution doesn't tell the federal to stay out of local government business. And I answer that with the video. You gotta watch the video. Okay. Article 3. Good to have you. Okay. Article 3 already kind of started. Let me do this for you as a reminder. So, Article 1 is the legislative branch. 2 is the executive. 3
Screwed up.
is the judicial branch.
Tyrannical branch.
Tyrannical branch. All right. They're in that order for a reason. I have them listed like this for a reason. What we normally see when you see most history or government type classes or things like that, what they'll do is they'll give you like a 3-branch tree or a 3-headed eagle, you know, and they'll have them all even. Well, 3 co-equal branches. Actually, the legislative branch is up here, executive branch is here, judicial branch is down here, in a sense of authority. And when you break it down, and we've kind of broken it down, I'm not going to get too much into it right now, you realize the legislative branch is the strongest 3 branches. The judicial branch was originally intended to be the weakest of the 3 branches, and the judges knew it at the time. This is where I love talking about John Jay, and the story of John Jay. Now, John Jay was very involved with, he was one of the 3 people who wrote Federalist Papers to support the Constitution and convince New York to ratify it. Now, he only wrote 9, but, okay, and you read his papers, they were kind of judicially, kind of heavy on the judicial end, law, rule of law, and all that. And he was our very first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And he served for a short while, and then he was very involved in the state of New York. Hence the reason why he was one of the people writing in federal papers. He was from New York. That was his state. He wanted his state to be willing to ratify. And the thing is, let me go back a little history. You had 3 kinds of people, for the most part. We really had more than that, but just to break it down as simplistic as we can, you had bigger government, believed in monarchy, believed in a strong centralized system, believed in a national government. You had those on the other side who were completely against any kind of central government. Let the states be individual and that's it, leave the states alone, they're independent countries, it's let it be like the Articles of Confederation. Then those in the middle who believed in the Constitution. Allow the states to keep their sovereignty on internal issues, however, create a strong central government for the other stuff. That scared a lot of people. Now, there's other idiosyncrasies like the loyalists and things like that, but I'm not going to get into that. For the most part, you had those people. New York tended to be an anti-federalist state. Now, while this wasn't the saying, the feeling back then, as New York goes, so goes the nation. New York was the most heavily populated. New York had the biggest diverse people and all that as a state. And it was also the largest when it came to and so New York was very important, and it was believed that if New York was, I'm going to turn this on because I'm burning up. Get from running upstairs. And it was believed that if New York would be willing to ratify the Constitution, the other states would fall in line. They weren't sure at first because a lot of people were afraid. Wait a second, we sent you in there to fix the articles, and you come back with a bigger government? What are you, crazy? Kind of the attitude of some people. So John Jay believed in bigger government, probably bigger than, when you read what he wrote, for the most part, a little bit bigger than this. He was more of a Hamiltonian guy, but Constitution satisfied Hamilton and John Jay in the sense that it did create a bigger government, but it didn't satisfy them in the sense that it didn't go all the way. Too many limitations, but hey, at least it was a step in the right direction. Therefore, John Jay was willing to defend it against the anti-federalists who were scared to death of it. Remember, during the convention, John Jay wasn't there during the convention, but his buddy Alexander Hamilton was. But the rest of the, I think it was 5 that were there, delegates, the rest of the delegation, early on, they got up and walked out. They wanted nothing to do with it.
And what mindset were they as the
They were anti-federalists, and so I think they left the big government guy by himself. Like, if I was an anti-federalist, the last thing I'd want to do is leave the big government guy by himself in a convention that could create a new government. So to me, that was a foolish move, getting up and walking out. But they were trying to make a statement, and they were hoping that the other delegates would vote.
Hamilton by himself could not be binding for the
No, because he was the only person representing the state, they stripped his vote. The state didn't have a vote. They wanted to. The state pretty much didn't have any vote unless there was actually at least 2 people. So New York had no vote when it came to the writing of this. Now that doesn't mean Hamilton didn't get that, but his vote didn't matter. He had no vote. All right, now, so he was almost like a non-voting observer. Now, kind of like the vice president would be in the Senate. You know, he could voice his opinion all he wanted, but his vote didn't matter. Of course, at least it would be a tiebreaker. But anyway,
if one of the 5 that left stuck around, then could Hamilton vote?
Yeah, then New York would have had a vote, a single vote, but between the 2 of them. But then there would have been no agreement because you would have 2 opposites, right? So, you know, how do you?
The vote probably would have been against the Constitution, but that's what.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, or at least for a more limited system. They were afraid of any central government. But anyway, get back on target here. So we've actually got a fear of big government, and therefore we have a fear of what was happening in Britain. In Britain, is the judicial branch became the king's rubber stamp. They were almost as powerful as the king himself, and there was a fear that would happen with the American judiciary. So they purposefully made the judiciary as weak as possible. There were some that actually argued against having a federal judiciary. Each of the states has a judicial branch. We don't need a federal judicial system. The argument was, well, what about states? What about law? You know, citizens who are arguing with each other, but they're from different states. Which state takes the case? You know, that kind of stuff. So the arguments were made and have a federal judiciary, but that it would be the weakest of the 3 branches. John Jay was the first, as I mentioned earlier, the first Chief Justice, and then he had the opportunity to run for office as governor of New York, and he won. So when he won governor of New York, he resigned as the first Chief Justice, and the next guy stepped. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But, and while he was, 2 other justices, second and third Chief Justice of the United States served while he was governor of New York. When Adam And the Federalists were bailing like crazy because the Federalists not only lost the White House, but they lost both houses of Congress. John Adams decided, and his Federalist Party and decided the best way to make sure that the Federalist Party power was between them had won the election inauguration was until March. You have 2 more months up. The Federalist Party passed a new judicial offices, and all Chief Justice had bailed. He needed a new chief, and so John Adams asked he would get position, but he used a fascinating set of words.
Even a second time? He asked him to serve.
Yeah, to come back as Chief Justice. So he had been the first. He asked him to come back and be the fourth. And John Jay said something interesting. He says that in its position, or condition actually, in its present condition, the system doesn't have enough power and so on and so forth. Well, by saying in its present, he's basically believed that and it did. But as it was, hey, not enough power. Matter of fact, let me give you, because it's very fascinating what he said. So I got the story of, I think I have the story of, I think I have the story of John Jay in here. If I don't, I definitely have it in my book. Maybe I don't. Could have sworn I had the story of John Jay in here.
What book you have it in?
Basic Constitution, and I also, in the latest one, the purple one, I think I go into it a little bit too. I thought I had the story of John Jay in here too. I guess not. I apologize. Could have sworn I did. Oh well. Yeah, fascinating. I could have sworn I had John Jay's story. This needs to be written. Need to add John Jay to it. Well, then again, I wrote those back about 4 years ago. So, but anyways, get back to John Jay. So it was too weak for him. He recognized that it was the weakest branch, and he didn't want that weak.
What was going on with Jefferson and the boys during the lame duck session when they saw all this crap going on?
Jefferson was writing a lot of articles complaining, but there was nothing they could do because they're not in power yet. There's nothing they can do about it other than make public protests, write.
Congress didn't do anything to repeal those laws.
Well, the new Congress wasn't in place yet. Back then, the new Congress took office at the same time in March.
No, I know, but in March when they took power, they didn't go back to try and undo any of that.
They
stuff?
did, yeah. Well, that goes back to Marbury versus Madison, which we'll get to eventually. Where Jefferson said, "Hey, these commissions. I mean, they couldn't undo the commissions that had already been delivered, but they could refuse to deliver the commissions that hadn't been delivered, being one of them."
Yeah.
So the question was, because I don't know if you guys could hear him, is what was Jefferson and his allies doing during this time that John Adams and the Federalist Party was doing all this? Well, there wasn't much they could do. It wasn't until March that they were going to be able to take office, and so during the lame duck session, the Federalist Party leadership knew that they were getting ready to lose both House of Congress and the White House once inauguration and the new session of Congress commenced. So they were doing all they could to retain way, so they did it. But anyway, so you got it's called midnight judges. What the law did is out of the creation of a whole bunch of new positions, and they did. But when it comes, if you'll let me go back to something real quick. Go back to Article 2, as we talked about this. Matter of fact, last week, it says right there, find it, right there at page 12, right, the tail end says, and shall commission all the officers of the United States. Well, when I went over that last Wednesday in the Temecula class, someone says, well, you mean officers' commissions? I said, no, it means all commissions. Not just, when he meant officers of the military, should I say. He meant military officers. I said, no. Military officers aren't the only ones that are commissioned. You know, your section, your judge, there's a commissioning process. And a part of that, the commission that's delivered. What happened was, judges nominated and then affirmed, then all they had was commission ready to roll. The of delivering the commission is, you made it. Well, executive president's function, power to the Secretary of State. So the Secretary of State, who's under the executive branch, is the person that delivers those commissions, or that's involved with delivering those commissions. And so when Jefferson finally did get a chance to take office, all of the commissions had not been delivered. So that job fell upon the new Secretary of State, James Madison. Jefferson said, hey, as far as I'm concerned, they're null and void. The Federalist Party, or he didn't say the Federalist Party, he said the opposition has retreated to the courts, where it will be more difficult to. Jefferson saw the problem with how the courts were going to be used right out the gate, didn't he? He saw it coming. The moment they started pulling that garbage, he saw it coming. And he told Madison, don't deliver those commissions. They're no good. The rest of them, forget it. Well, Marbury was one of those guys. And he sued. Said, hey, I should want my commission. And who did he sue? He sued the guy who was supposed to give him the commission, James Madison. He didn't sue the government. He didn't sue the president. He sued James Madison, the Secretary of State, for not delivering his commission. So I'm sorry?
What was the position he was gonna have?
He was gonna be the Justice of the Peace in Washington, D.C., actually. It was an additional Justice of Peace. It was already, I think, one or two that existed, so they split up the districts and made more of them. Anyway, is it getting cold? See, I was burning up earlier, but I can burn it up. No problem.
No, it feels good to me.
Feels good. Well, I tell you what, I'm gonna put it a couple of degrees higher than where it is. That way, if I start roasting, it'll turn on again. But I don't want icicles to start forming on her because, of course, you're wearing like a flannel thing there, right?
I'm cold.
Yet you're still cold.
The rest of us with no jacket.
She says she's cold.
I don't wear jackets in California here.
When we got in the car earlier today, the car's burning up. We get in the car and I turn on the AC. You know, the leather's like, you know, frying my body. My wife says, "What are you doing? It's cold in here." I'm like, "You're not on the same cycle I am."
Who was the Secretary of State under Adams?
We'll get to that. All right, so now I set that up. We're going to go back to that. I want to set a few. Now, to understand the judicial branch. Judicial branch. Let's go back to original intent here. We'll get back to this story because I want to wrap up that story later. So here's what on page 12. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court. What's vested? You remember? So in other words, the states used to hold all that power. They have now vested the judicial power of, doesn't say all United States, of the United States, meaning of the federal government. So federal was given to the Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Okay? So there's a transfer of power here. Not all judicial power. Only federal judicial power has been granted here. Okay? And understand, judicial power, it's a specific power. It doesn't say judicial power and some legislative power, maybe a little bit of executive power. It says judicial power only. remember we got, once again, we got the three branches, legislative, the executive, and the judicial. So, law, as in create, modify, or repeal. Execute the law, and apply the law. Not interpret. Time when I just want to go bonkers. As I'm learning the point of view of guys of today, I'm a purist, but nonetheless, I like being a purist because that's the way it was originally intended. Their job is to apply the law, not interpret the law. If you allow them to interpret the law, they can interpret it to mean anything they want. So the term is apply the black letter of the law. What it says is what it says. You can't play into it. Now, there are times where you do have to play a little bit of a sleuth to figure out, because the language is a little different, and you gotta take certain things, but it still says what it says. It's not, you don't have to do a little sleuthing because you need to interpret it. It's because language has changed all that, so you gotta go back to that original, thinking. You gotta figure it out. And because the left has done so well at screwing up our language and lexicon and changing things, where different things mean different things, right? All right, and that is the separation of powers, remember, okay? All right, the judges, both of the superior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior. So what's bad behavior? She said Democrats.
Bill Clinton?
Yeah, bad behavior is anything that the Clintons are willing to do.
Hillary?
The mafia is jealous because even they haven't gotten as evil as the Clintons. Anyway,
Well, they
all
haven't
right.
gotten away with things.
They don't get away with the same things the Clintons get away with, yeah.
They were supporting him.
Someone asked me the other day if I think that Hillary Clinton will be running again 2020. I said, run, hell, she can barely stand. All right, sorry, I had to go there. Okay. Good behavior, bad behavior. Bad behavior in today's lexicon essentially means when it comes to judges, they committed a crime. I believe there's more. Bad behavior could be unconscious. Could it not be? Must be, right? Because, matter of fact, James Madison had a word for that when it came to the president and the judges. And he actually argued that it would be in this document, and it was not used. His word was maladministration. In your readings, you've probably come across that, I'm going to guess. Maladministration. That was James Madison's word. Maladministration. Administration. Means to do it that purposely. Maladministration. I totally agree with Matt. They should have put that as. I don't think the Constitution is wrong on a word they should have kept. But, and shall for their services, talk about the word compensation. It's a service to get a compensation. They're not getting a salary as a compensation. These guys, man, well, because they didn't expect the Supreme Court to be needed that much. Once again, what are you're right, it's all disputes between the states, things like that. And the legislative branch can handle that stuff first anyway. It's only the judicial branch if there's still a dispute after the legislative dealings of it. So it goes back to the guy, remember when that goes back to the people, I shouldn't say guy, but the people who were arguing that meeting once a year was too often. Right? It's a service. I mean, compensated for showing up every once in a while because the federal government's authorities are so small, they're really going to need to meet anyway, right? Now what do we got? That sound effect was perfect. Yeah. Exactly. All right. All right. Which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. Well, that was to guard against threats and things like that. If you don't rule in our favor, we're going to reduce your pay. Can't do that. All right, so now we're going to read section 2, and then I'm going to get back to our story with Marbury versus Madison. This section 2 tells us what their authorities are. And then when we get talking about judicial review, you find out they've gone way beyond this. This is what their authorities are. The judicial power shall extend to. Okay, so it says, it begins as the judicial power of the United States shall be vested. Okay, what is the judicial power? It's telling you. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution. What does arising under this Constitution mean? Today, they will tell you, well, if it affects your constitutional rights. That's not necessarily exactly right. What it means is arising under this Constitution. In other words, what's authorized. Okay? Rising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States and the treaties made or which shall be made under their authority. Sounds like what we'll go over later. It sounds like the same language used for the Supremacy Clause. So, first of all, their first judicial power thing, it says what's authorized the federal government, basically. They can take those cases. Treaties, laws are made pursuant to the Constitution itself. Stuff added because there are things that go beyond cases affecting ambassadors. Okay, so that's pretty clear. Other public ministers and consuls to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. Once again, remember what's created. Controversies, we have two controversies between two or more states. So if two states I got a problem with each other, like Arizona complaining because the marijuana infected water from them growing so much pot in Colorado is getting down into Arizona, it's killing the cattle. I don't know if you knew that. Because the water, what's happening is there's so much, the pesticides and the marijuana itself and residue and all that from the growing in Colorado, now it's getting into the rivers, streams, works its way down in Arizona. Now the livestock drinks that water and it kills them. So now there's a conflict between those two states. It's a controversy between the two states. Well, now that we've talked about that, right? That's where the federal government acts as a referee or a mediator to help fix the situation. Then we have brackets. This means this no longer applies. What's in brackets here no longer applies because of the 11th Amendment. I'm not going to get into it tonight. We'll get into it when we get to the 11th Amendment. Between the state and citizens of another state. Then it says between citizens of different states. Between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states. Okay, so crossing state lines. So there's a dispute. Once again, federal government comes as mediator, right? Then we got the bracket again. And between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign states, citizens or subjects. Once again, when we get to the 11th Amendment, we get into. I know you're dying to add to that, Dennis, because he knows where we're going to go with it. But I'll wait until we get to the 11th. Now let's get back to the story about Marbury versus Madison. Now that we understand the limitations here, and there are other things, but get to it. So let's get back to our story. So remember now, William Marbury is suing Madison for not delivering his commission. It goes through the court system, works its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court in this case had appellate jurisdiction. We're going to go over this again later, but I want you to just keep in mind. Appellate jurisdiction means the allowance of a court to take a case after it's been appealed. Okay? That's what appellate. There are two jurisdictions. We'll get to the other one in a little while. Alright. So appellate jurisdiction. So in this case, the Supreme Court had appellate jurisdiction. It got to the Supreme Court, and John Marshall and his ruled in favor of Marbury, said, "You're right," in his commission. But we're not the executive branch, so we can't execute. We can't enforce. That's the job of the president. And since it was the president that said, "No, you win, but good luck getting your commission." John Marshall understood that the court did not have enforcement power. Do you think today's judges understand that?
They know, but
Well, because all they gotta do is say so. Yes, court, yes, Your Honor, right? I hate that term, Your Honor, by the way. I refuse to call judges Your Honor. I refuse to call judges Your Honor. I call them judge and then their last name. I'll be respectful enough to call them judge. They don't.
Call him Judge Dredd.
Judge Dredd. I dread the judge. That's actually an awesome movie. The first one's no good. The second one's no good. Okay. That movie criticism, right? Okay. Deep down, I'm gonna get into trouble. Usually with my wife. But anyway, now, what happens when they're ruling the judges right their opinion? Now, John Marshall, being the dictator that he was, he basically told this court that whenever an opinion needed to be written, he was going to write it. He really didn't allow other opinions to be written unless he was. And in his written opinion, he added something that was very interesting. In his opinion, the position the court is up to, how he believes that they take the responsibility to ensure that they protect, preserve, and promote the Constitution, or whatever it says, protect and defend the Constitution in the oath, and so therefore, in order to protect and defend the Constitution, if there are laws that they believe to be unconstitutional, they have to deem them unconstitutional. And for most people that don't think very deeply, it seems reasonable enough that judges could do that. And Jefferson went nuts because he understood what it meant. That John Marshall was trying to pull the responsibilities of the Constitution from the hands of the people in the states and put it by final arbiter. I say the final word. That has become judicial review, and under judicial is given what we just read. In addition to, they strike down state laws that Constitution as being all because, hey, we're final arbiters.
was that pivotal to Marbury versus Madison? You're saying he was writing that was kind of a feeling he had across the board.
As he's writing it, he's got, well, this applies to this because the case really didn't have anything to do with that, to be honest with you.
Well, I know is the watershed case.
That began that process.
So he basically, you're entitled to, and we can't do luck. So where was it? Where was the knife twisted?
But I tell you what, if there's a law we don't like, we can strike that sucker down. We have power over that. It's kind of what he said.
So that's the
Now listen about John Marshall. Something called federal. I'm not called federal supremacy, but constitutional federal supremacy, according to Article 6, means that the federal government is supreme when the law believe and the general as an excuse, and that therefore the federal government should be supreme on everything. Now he didn't dare say that up front, but he kind of did that with judicial review. Then there are 8 more cases during his time. Matter of fact, my latest book, Civil Wars Constitutional Liars, I go through all those cases where he uses his opinion in rulings to strengthen federal supremacy with each one over different things, using basically the power of the judicial gavel. That's the way it is, and everybody went, okay.
Abuse of power.
Abuse of power. That's a great way of putting it. How about judicial activism?
Yeah.
How about legislating from the bench? I mean, we could,
Yeah.
it all started with John Marshall. Now understand, Marbury versus Madison was what year? 1803. When was this thing written? 1787. We were barely out the gate with this thing, and they were already pulling this garbage. This idea of this, especially when I talk conservatives, is progressive. What's been happening over the last 100 years? No, it happened right out the gate. I mean, if you want to get real specific, you can go back to 1793, I believe it was, when Alexander Hamilton was arguing for this national bank, Bank of the United States, a centralized banking system. That too went against this and was a big government, let the rest of the world and powerful people be in charge and in control of your monetary system, which controls everything. And that was 5 years after. Our problems began quick. I mean, better yet, let's go back to the Federalist Papers, before this thing was even ratified. After it was written, before it was ratified, and James Madison found it necessary to write 5 times in the Federalist Papers, I've got the list somewhere on Political Pistachio, the difference between a republic and a democracy. Why do you feel the need to do that? Because there were forces out there, Alexander Hamiltonian guys, John Marshall guys, who are arguing there's no difference between a democracy and a republic. And what do we got today?
There's no difference.
We've got everybody, hey, we're a democracy. There's no difference. When I say, well, we're a republic. They say, well, okay, a representative democracy. No, that's not what we're a republic. Well, yeah, but that's a representative democracy. No difference. Yes, there is. But the problem is, many of the characteristics of a republic are gone. 17th Amendment's part of it. The fact that the counties no longer appoint the state senators and that the state senate districts are no longer the county lines. That's a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could go, thing after thing after thing after thing after thing that has been showing us move away from almost our democracy. And it's dangerous.
California, so but they're moving away from that with Brown and all that.
Well, the Democratic Party began their journey with Andrew Jackson. He is known as the father of the Democratic Party. Why is he the father of the Democratic Party? Because he believed in pure democracy. We're a republic. So, I bring that up, though, James Madison, papers, he's writing this in between the time this thing was written and it was ratified, and there's already these types of attacks going on. What we're experiencing is, it's just, it's taken them over 200 years to get. Boy, I tell you what, they've been patient. They've kept it going. Wish there was a switch or Republican again, but it's going to take a lot of work. That's why I do these classes. Understand the way this is supposed to be. Now you know what we got to get back to. It's like the car, I mean, we're all-star collision is one of the classes on Tuesday nights. Think those mechanics down there just start pulling. I think this is the way to know. They know how it's supposed to properly function. So why I want it to function this way? So I'm going to do this instead. No, it doesn't work that way. The only way the vehicle is to reach the original way it's supposed to function. Doesn't matter how you want it to function. You have to go back the way it's supposed to function.
And how do we get it to
That
go
goes back to this. But if you don't understand how it's supposed to function, it doesn't matter how you think we can get there if you don't even understand how it's supposed to function in the first place. If I got a mechanic down there that doesn't understand how the car is supposed to operate or the how, because they don't know what. And we've got a society today who says, hey, I love my democracy. Well, how in the heck are we going to fix our system if we don't think it's a democracy?
A republic? Republic.
Right. Well, that's what I just said. That's what I'm getting at. How are we going to fix it if we think it's a democracy, is my point.
Education.
Education. Well,
Not.
and then someone says, oh, okay, so we're going to fix our democracy. No, it's a republic. You can't even get what it is right. And you want to figure out how to fix it? Well, you know what it is. Hey, let's put the Chevy engine in the Ford. Well, it's a Ford. No, but We think it's a Chevy, it'll work. Democracy thinks it'll work. It don't work that way, does it? You gotta have the right engine and the right vehicle in order for it to travel properly. So we pop the hood of our Republic and we look inside and we see all kinds of stuff in the wrong place and not working properly. And then when you really know what you're talking about, you notice the stuff missing. No wonder it can't get up the hill. They can barely. And the last president tried to remove the brakes. So then on the downhill, it wouldn't stop.
Well, I say education, but I brought you in that school book that explains that a republic and a democracy are essentially the same thing.
Yeah, that's what you had a textbook that essentially said that. And it's, oh gosh, that's something new. No, it isn't. We've been arguing against that since Madison wrote the Federalist, some of his Federalist papers. Same argument. Drives me nuts. Okay, so we get back to Marbury versus Madison. So review in place. And let's think about this for a second. To create a federal government that is limited. That its authorities are only authorities given to it by who? States. The states used to have all the authorities. They have authority. They had original authority over every issue. And they said, okay, we're going to give federal government these authorities because that's what it needs to function. Okay? So we got this federal government, and now we got judicial review where the judges say, oh, no. It's our job, though, to make sure that that works properly. It's our job to make sure we maintain this. So let's think about that for a second. So the federal courts are a part of the federal government. The federal government is supposed to be limited. Now, if a law needs to be validated regarding whether or not it's a constitutional authority of the federal government, and the federal courts are the ones making that decision, what's happening is the federal government is deciding for itself what its own authorities are. How is that limited government? You know, it's funny because Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale College, and I love the man, but he disagrees with me on judicial review. He supports the idea of judicial review. And I said to him exactly what I just told you. Supreme Court or federal court gets a case to decide whether or not a law is constitutional or not. Whether or not that law is constitutional is to mean whether or not the federal government has authority over that issue. And by the federal courts being the ones to make that decision, the federal government is deciding for itself what its own authorities are. How is that limited government? It was the first time during that discussion that Dr. Larry Arnn had no response. He didn't know how to respond to that. Because it really takes federalism and encapsulates it in one simple scenario. It's a limited government. The federal government's not supposed to decide for itself. It's not its own boss. Its boss or its parents are the states. It has to ask the states for permission to have an authority. It can't decide for itself what its authorities are, or if something's not an authority. It's not its job. It's supposed to abide by its authorities. But if it's not abiding by its authorities, then the boss, the parents, need to get involved. Or if it wants a new authority, then they have to ask the parents for permission to have that authority. Hence the reason why it takes 3/4 of states to ratify an amendment. The states are giving their permission. And the federal government's gotten to the point through the courts of saying, hey, we can decide for ourselves and the courts will validate it. You know, and the story I like to tell on to help you understand this, and some of you have heard this story, I know you haven't. It's like a contractor, you know, you want to add a room to your house. And, you know, you write the contract, you know, and it gives the authorities to that contractor. They're going to add the room, so they have the authority of using this kind of lumber. The room's going to be this diameter, you know, these dimensions, and so on and so forth. And then you go to let you come back, and the crew is mowing your lawn, sweeping your sidewalk, and cleaning your gutter. Whoa, what's going on here? I hired you guys to add a room to my house. And they said, hey, we interpreted the contract to mean that we can do the yard work too. Extra. There's nothing you can do about it because our lawyers said it's on the up and up. Now that way, no. You know what's in the. So here we got this contractor, the federal government. We can do all this stuff, but it's okay to say, the judiciary says it's okay. Okay, well, they're the judges, they know what's going on. What are we? Why get fired up when
Very stupid.
yeah, Jefferson went nuts during his presidency. Court. The courts will use that power. Don't worry. We do have but we do have. Just saying it long enough, eventually the people who are against it die off, and everybody believes it. They'll lie often enough, and it becomes the truth, right?
It takes how many generations?
Takes how many generations? I'm a firm believer. It takes about 16 years.
Yeah, what's his name? Say a lot. You say a lot loud.
Yeah. A little state business. All right. Go a little bit further. Page 13. There it says authorities, but in all cases, senators, other public ministers, consuls, and those in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. Remember, I put appellate jurisdiction. Appellate jurisdiction means that you can take a case that was appealed. So now the other power is original jurisdiction. Original jurisdiction. Well, if appellate jurisdiction means that it was appealed, the original jurisdiction means it wasn't appealed. In other words, that court is taking the case originally. In other words, they have to be the first court to take the case. So, in this list of stuff, the Supreme Court has to be the first ones to take the case. That means it cannot be filed in the inferior courts. Let me read that list again now that you understand that. In cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and those in which a state shall be party. When the federal government sued the state of Arizona over their immigration. And Eric Holder then, filed it in a district court. Please to the case on that says right here that in the case of, when there's a case in which the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, therefore it had to have been filed, could not go to the district courts or any of the other appellate courts, the inferior courts.
Why is it nobody knows this crap?
Yeah.
I mean, you got.
When it happened, I wrote emails to Brewer, the district attorney, DOJ office, Secretary of State, and Obama. Secretary of State was Hillary Clinton. DOJ was Eric Holder, who filed in the first place. President was Obama. I wasn't going to hold my breath, but I figured at least Brewer would get it.
Hillary asked for it. Sure.
Well, you know that roll toilet paper, probably how my letter was being used. But one of only two people.
No, but I'm just talking about you've got governors, you got representatives, you got other legal people.
You know what the response from political animals is? Well, you gotta understand the Constitution's only a guideline.
It's kicked out of YouTube.
And the Hillary toilet paper, yeah. I told them they need to find an Obama turd and then put the two together as a display. All right.
Prop 8.
Prop 8's a great example. Prop 8, the California State Constitutional Amendment. It's on an issue. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives the federal government authority over marriage or sexual tendencies or anything. Nothing. None of the federal government's business. So what happens? A gay judge takes the Prop 8, which was basically said marriage between a man and a woman is a man and a woman, and he says, well, it's unconstitutional. So one gay judge overthrew the vote in California. Constitutional amendments to the state constitution can be democratically approved. Matter of fact, they must be democratically approved according to the California state constitution. One judge who of interest, right? Because he's one. Number two, federal government's not supposed to take that case. And we got one guy who was never elected, by the way. He was appointed, saying, hey, screw you. Doesn't matter what you think. This is what I think. It doesn't matter if the Constitution says it. This is what I think the Constitution would have said, would have meant if this was up.
And what
And our
court was that?
future governor
Well,
said whether you like it or not.
I think it was the Ninth Circus at the time.
Yeah, okay.
Which Ninth Circus is getting ready to be completely changed if we can just get all these nominations through.
This
But
may
it
be,
should have gone straight to the Supreme Court.
Should have straight, well, no, it shouldn't have left the state courts.
So California State Supreme Court should have been the final arbiter.
California State Supreme Court should have been the final say because there's no federal authority over marriage or anything of that
No,
nature.
but if the feds wanted to say that they could meddle with it,
Well, since the state was one of the parties,
And
well,
it should-
actually, technically, the state wasn't a party. They didn't sue the state. They sued. Can't remember if it was the governor or who was it they sued. They didn't sue the actual state, so it wouldn't have gone to the Supreme Court. It wasn't original jurisdiction because the state wasn't one of the parties. It was a member of the leadership of the state that got sued. That makes sense.
but now how does that apply to the Texas rancher that the feds came in and tried and put him in jail? He's doing time now.
Texas rancher, or do you mean Nevada rancher?
Maybe Nevada rancher.
Talking
yeah.
about the Bundy Ranch
Yeah.
deal, that's Nevada rancher, not Texas. Well, that's a whole different discussion, which I'm not gonna get into. But, the question on that is, does the federal government have authority over that land in the first place?
No,
No. He was right. The rancher was right.
and he's in doing jail time?
He's doing jail time. Well, I think he got out now.
Yeah, I think Trump got one.
His son actually sent me a email thanking me for, or I'm sorry, his son. His son and, also Lavoie's son, the one who got killed in Oregon. Both of them, their sons.
The
had
federal
sent me
agent.
emails thanking me for, because I was all over that stuff back then.
The guy the federal agent blew away?
Yeah, one that was, yeah, the federal government. All right. In all other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction. There's the other jurisdiction. Both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. That last thing I just read is called the exceptions clause. I'm going to spend just a moment with it. Just going to spend just a moment with it. We started 5 minutes late, so I'm going to go to 5 after, if you guys don't mind. I'm just going to spend a moment with this, but I want to explain what the exceptions clause means.
13.
You look it up, here's what it means. Congress has the authority, they take exception to a ruling or an opinion by the judges to use legislation to make null and void that ruling or opinion. In other words, the judges are not the check against Congress. Congress is the judge, is the check against the judges. It's backwards nowadays. They say, well, no, God, the Supreme Court's there to make sure that the Congress is not acting unconstitutional. No, it's the exact opposite. Congress checks the judges. Who checked Congress, Doug? And who appointed those people? We did.
Okay, what paragraph are you reading on that?
The second half of the paragraph that began in all cases
All right.
affecting ambassadors, the last part of that. All right, couple more common sense things. The trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury. And such trial shall be held, and by the way, there's an amendment later that allows you to waive your right to a jury if it's a smaller case claims, but we'll get to that when we get to the 7th Amendment. All right, so trials of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury. So in case of impeachment, who's the jury? Senate. And such trial shall be held in the state where the said crime shall have been committed. In other words, if you committed a crime in California, they can't try you in Massachusetts. Why? Does Massachusetts understand the idiosyncrasies that are associated with the state of California?
Mm-hmm.
It's a different culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, we don't even talk the same. And if you don't believe me, go to Boston. You won't understand anybody. Sorry for you those who live in Boston. All right, I have a friend of mine who moved here from Boston 30 years ago, and he still can't understand them. All right. Well, unless they say Boston Red Sox, you usually figure that one out. The rest of it, Connecticut, it goes for Connecticut too. You can't understand it. But Boston's worse.
I grew up in Websterstown. I don't have an accent.
All right. And when not committed within any state, the trial shall be at such places as the Congress may by law have directed. Well, you know, like Washington D.C. or like the territory, things like that. Okay, finally, let's wrap this up so we can do Article 4 next week. Treason against the United States shall consist only, so this is the definition of treason. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, who's them? The states, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort.
Sending billions to our enemies.
I want to respond, but I don't have time. If I start talking about Obama, we'll be here another hour. All right.
Billions.
Get Obama, what about what's coming across the border right now? They talk
Well, yeah, you got a caravan that's on its way to give you affection. Because they love you so much. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses to the same overt act. That way you don't have just one person that doesn't like you suddenly getting in trouble for treason. There's got to be a second witness. Or on confession in open court. Open court, not closed court. Everybody's watching. The Congress shall have the power to declare a punishment of treason. How many times have you heard someone say, well, it says right there in the Constitution, the punishment of treason is death? It doesn't say that in the Constitution. It says the Congress has the authority to determine the punishment. Now, the punishment has always been death, because that's what Congress has defined it as being, but it does not say in the Constitution that the punishment of treason is death. And I hear that all the time from people. It says right in the Constitution, the punishment of treason is death. It doesn't say that. It says the Congress has the punishment, and they have decided it's death.
Says it in the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Yeah, it does say UCMJ. Oh, absolutely. In nice big bold letters. But no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood. What's corruption of blood?
That's done to your.
Your bloodline. You committed treason. So as much as I want to say that the candidate, the hunter, who's the grandson of a terrorist from the Munich 1972 Olympic massacre, shouldn't be elected because his grandfather was that guy. Well, he's not his grandfather. No corruption of blood. Of course, he's such a hardcore liberal anyway. I don't want him anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Or forfeiture except during the life of the person detained. So once that person's dead, the forfeiture stopped. Can't say, well, you know what? Your uncle was treasonous guy, so we're taking this to pay for that. Well, no, he's gone. It's over. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I heard this on the radio today. It's not my thought, but is Mexico, I think this is Guatemala, they're having this caravan coming in.
Yeah, caravan from Honduras of all these wonderful little families who just want freedom in America. But I looked at the picture and it was all men in their 20s, except for maybe one woman.
Who's
That's
behind it?
interesting.
Who's
That's
behind
Mike.
it?
Hey, I'm gonna drive out. I left my gate thing, and there's a weirdo out there. So after I drive out, just watch.
All right, no problem. There's a weirdo. All right, so
Oh, that's it.
Sneaking around.
I'll have to watch for him to leave. And
So
I'll
my
get after
question is, there's a group called CARA that is sponsoring.
Yeah, they're funding
people
him.
So
So
are
all
they
these,
creating treason? Is that?
Yeah.
Yes or no? So
They're giving aid and comfort to an invasion force.
Right. That's what was brought up. Oh.
They gave aid and comfort to an invasion force. Is this an invasion force?
No, it's just.
Absolutely it is.
Well, what do you
Something
see?
that-
pushing the
oh,
baby
no,
stroke.
Doug, it's these poor little families that want to, yeah, these guys in their 20s with tattoos all over the face. Yeah, no, it's just kids.
Oh, no, they're just welfare recipients.
Future welfare recipients. It's an invasion force. All right, so here's the question. Should
Right.
that invasion force be met with force at the border?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. But now, see,
Will
The
it?
left is trying to set our president up. Think about it. If he does nothing, well, then it sends a message, come on, one, come all, they ain't gonna stop you.
Right.
If he does stop him, that heartless bastard.
Exactly.
And if it winds up being a Kent State situation where somebody gets killed, well, then they'll never live that down.
Right.
And that's what they want. They want bloodshed so bad. I'm hoping our president has an idea. Well, he's already mentioned part of his strategy regarding this. Loss of federal aid and sanctions to the countries that people coming from. Basically, hey, control your people or you're screwed.
And they're already raising heck about that. How come you're gonna
Walk
punish them?
that
The
1,000
people
miles.
that's already destitute. I don't see anybody that's destitute. Every one of them look like the meat they've been eating well.
I've always had trouble figuring this out. If you don't mind passing the bucket around, Ken. I've always had trouble figuring this out. If America is so racist
Yeah, but-
and so horrible, why are you fighting to get in?
Why, what?
And why are they coming here?
And why you? And if the place you're coming from is so horrible, destitute, why are you flying their flag while you're here? Right? It's a contradiction, isn't it?
I think
Now-
you gotta take all these Democrats, especially the ones that have Hispanic background and speak the language, and are, some of them dual citizens. Take them and take a lot of the other people that are coming here, send them all back to Mexico
Well,
with the voting power,
Right.
and then they can make Mexico kinda like us.
Yeah.
yeah, but the problem is, all those people try to make Mexico more of a democracy, which would make it even worse, actually.
I've been seeing that for a long
All right,
time.
let me ask you this. I've always
Saying that.
believed that this country is our home and the border is our door and our windows. So let's say it's your home. So if someone breaks into your house by breaking through your window, you automatically make them a part of the family, right?
Yes.
Your cemetery.
In the cemetery. I mean, even when someone knocks on the door, you vet them before you let them in, right? I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat. You vet them before you let them in. And when you leave, you lock your door. Why? Because you know that while most of the people out there probably aren't going to mess with you, there are people out there that will. So all these people trying to come in illegally, bullcrap. MS-13, rapists, criminals, whatever. So yeah, okay, I don't care if the percentage only people exist in that population. You gotta weed them out. That's what.
I'm gonna bring a comment you made that you got booed on at the,
Oh, at the NAACP?
Sure. That sounds like it.
I don't care what they say.
I-
They're all coming up here to come across the border without proper papers. They're all criminals.
Well, Dennis brought up something, and then we'll end this.
I'm sorry to bring it up.
No, this is good.
Yeah.
So I tell most crowds, especially Republican, conservative, or constitutionalist crowds, if you had a bowl full of M&Ms and you knew that 2 of them in there were poison and would kill you, would you grab a handful and start eating? Well, it's only 2 of them. Such a small number. Well, no. And so then I used that same thing at an NAACP forum I was a part of, and the crowd exploded because suddenly I was calling illegal aliens poison. How dare you? I mean, you thought a bomb had burst in the middle of the room. That racist! He was there.
Waiting for it.
Should have.
I was watching the sheriff's deputies at corners,
and
move their
I-
hand closer to their guns. They were getting nervous.
And I knew it was coming. I could see it in his eyes, and I thought, oh, Doug, don't say that one here. And he did. He
I was
sure
being
enough.
honest.
Yeah.
And then the next question after the immigration was, well, what do you think of Black Matter and the players kneeling during the national anthem? I'm like, oh great, now I'm going to cause a riot. And I explained. I said, well, in the First Amendment it says peaceably assemble, protest, knock yourself out. But do it peaceably. And an old man in the back room said, I ain't gonna have no white guy telling me how I'm allowed to protest.
Now, he was wearing a military hat.
Yeah, he's a veteran on top of that.
That's right.
I bumped into him, by the way, at Navy Federal Credit Union.
We're
Later.
not gonna give
It was hilarious. We had a nice little conversation while we were waiting in line. He was waiting to deposit a check. I was waiting to pull money out. You usually tell, people and that. Anyway, all right. Yeah, and he was waiting to deposit a check. It had a government symbol on it, and I was gonna pull money out and deposit a check. That. Anyway, all right. We'll see you next Tuesday. For those of you who don't know, because I really didn't put it out there just because I've been so busy I hadn't had a chance. If you're doing nothing tomorrow for the heck of a drive, Miracle Springs out in the Desert Hot Springs. I'm speaking out there tomorrow for the lunchtime meeting, Women's Federated group out there. So,
Hey, did you hear anything about the meeting that was held at Corona last week? Because I wrote it down when John Diggs was talking about, and I never made it.
talking about the rally?
The meeting in the city council chamber.
Oh yeah, that was last Wednesday, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard what happened. All right, see you guys next week.
Alrighty, thank you.
And when you get down there, I'll open the gate because apparently there's a weirdo down there. I don't want to do it till you guys are down
I was just scared to cut the line in the caravan. Got here first. Yeah, I saw Channel 9 News reporting on that caravan last night, and it was like the poor mom with the kid in the stroller and
there.
feeding
Oh,
the
pictures
son
I
and
saw was
water.
nothing but 20-something males.
Yeah, the male's walking by, but in the meantime, they pick on the mom with the kid, the stroller, 1,000 miles. Something wrong with
Yeah,
that.
because I was worried about people coming through, but you know.
That's crazy.
But then, of course, the other
I
stuff
don't
I
really
listen
watch
to,
it.
all radio, they're all screaming.
I know, I feel like he,
Crazy stuff, Skip. Crazy stuff.
and I go like this, I want to watch some more.
All right.
My mother-in-law's on one.
Oh, okay, then you know all about it.
Yeah, that little hum.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell him that.
Yeah, it's no big deal. Oh, hold on now. Whoa, slow down now. Hold on. I only have 8.
Where did 17 get in there for? I don't know where
It
that
went with 7.
Yeah, 7. Somehow 17 squeezed in there. I don't know where 17 came from.
And you said you had 5 and 6?
Yeah.
Did you get, have you, do you
They're
have,
separated by the red.
do you have one of these?
6.
What's that?
Biblical values.
You go online if you.
Very
want.
good.
It helps you with your, voter guide. They have information there, if you need any kind of information. It's all on there.
So what's the deal here?
Well,
Do you want the lemons?
These are,
Nobody was
than
interested.
Sure.
days.
Okay.
This is next.
Now I gotta buy some avocados.
Or no, wait,
Who has
this
the
is
avocado
809,
tree?
but
Nobody-
This is
My
fast.
brother-in-law is the only one that had one. His mom did, and he brought me 2, and they were so big and last all week. And I've never had an avocado that could last all week because it was so big. But they don't really share.
They don't really share.
They don't share. But I
Six.
was gonna tell you about
This is
Walter fell almost a year
7
ago
in
in his
days.
speech, and when I called him recently,
This is
I
today.
couldn't even. It sounded like he had a. He said, "When I fell, it took away my speech." I barely could hear it, and I don't know if he feels good enough to come because he
He
can't
ended up
speak.
getting off of the
But
boat.
if you hear him lightly, you can hear
And
him.
then
But he said just him with his fall took away.
Oh,
Like this, and
wow.
just call him like once in a
Okay.
while, like to let him know like what we're
They
doing.
ended up having to go.
And
ended
even
up
if you don't
going
come,
down,
because he's
Van
busy,
Buren.
I could barely hear him.
He was
Well, that's definitely meant
It had to be very frustrating.
And luckily, most of them
I
agree,
could
so that means I don't
imagine.
have to like hurry.
Oh, yeah, because my neighbor, well, what's her name, Carmen? The one that was supporting you first? She's
Yeah.
downsizing,
Yes.
and she's trying to,
All
get
right,
out
well,
of
God
here.
bless.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
yeah, she might go, she might leave out of state,
Here,
might.
you-
Can't believe last time she's here, I didn't recognize her.
She's still the same, short and little.
Okay,
That way you know.
okay, very good. You're a great help, Ken. Mr. Ken.
Well,
Yes, Very nice.